Thank you for tuning in to the Voice of the Victim podcast. We discuss a lot of sad and potentially triggering things on this show. We try to be as sensitive and cautious as possible, but if you are sensitive to things involving abuse and may be triggered, please think twice before listening to our show. Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. I'm Rosie.
I'm Ryan.
And before we start our show today, we want to say a huge thank you to our newest patron,
Samantha.
Thank you, Samantha. We really appreciate your generous support.
Yeah, thank you.
And we also have a 5-star review that we want to share this morning. It's not even morning.
Yeah, it feels weird. We're shaking things up this week with you saying the intro.
And the blinds are closed. It's throwing me off.
It's just a weird week, I guess.
Ryan, would you like to read our 5-star review?
Wow, we're really mixing it up. Maybe I should read the outline too. All right. This review is from Heather Bell over on Stitcher. And it's from almost a year ago. I've been pulling from iTunes reviews in the past, and I realized there were a few over on Stitcher that we missed. So that's why this week and last week have both been from Stitcher. But anyway, Heather Bell, she says, perfect for crime junkies. I really enjoy listening to Rosie and Ryan's podcasts. With them being a married couple, it has just enough unpolished touch that helps with the dark subjects of the episodes. Both Rosie and Ryan do an excellent job focusing on the victim's point of view. Additionally, I appreciate how Ryan is sensitive to a subject that largely includes female victims and male perpetrators. In the last episode, Ryan gave an example of the trust and freedom we give those trusted workers like the postal man. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Heather.
Yes, thank you, Heather.
I can't remember which episode that was.
I feel like it wasn't that long ago, actually.
You say that, but...
Really? It really was.
A lot of episodes feel like they weren't that long ago. Like when we had the Yasser Saeed update. Mm-hmm. Amina and Sarah, that was episodes 50 and 51.
That is kind of
75 episodes ago, dude.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Anyway.
Very nice review. You got a nice pat on the back in that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Like we said, we had to pull this one from a while ago, which means we need more reviews. So go on our iTunes or whatever you guys do reviews on and throw us a 5-star, and you too can be featured on the show.
Yeah.
Also, October is coming up, and we just want to remind our patrons and soon-to-be patrons, you can be part of our drawing for a free t-shirt that we do every month. Because insanely enough, summer is drawing to an end, and October is right around the corner.
Anyway, tonight's case is really rough. Like, it's sad, and it's going to be tough. Who are we talking about tonight, Rosie?
We are talking about Elizabeth Olten. So, Elizabeth Olten was born on December 15th, 1999 in Jefferson City, Missouri. Her parents were Patricia Priez and Dale Olten Sr.
For the second week in a row, we have Patricia as a main part of the story. But this one seems to like going by Patty, whereas Patty Hearst preferred Patricia, even though the media branded her as Patty. But anyway, we're going to call Elizabeth's mom Patty.
As she grew up, Elizabeth was very close to her mother. They would do puzzles together and bake cookies. She loved listening to Taylor Swift and was also a big Hannah Montana fan. Elizabeth had a love for horses and other animals and was very outgoing and able to make friends easily.
I don't think her parents were together for much of her childhood, and you'll see why.
Her relationship with her father was a bit different than with her mother. He had a lot of love for her, but he had gotten into some trouble. In June of 2007, Dale Olten Sr. had been busted with a controlled substance with intent to distribute.
So basically for drug dealing. And I read that he was sentenced to 4 years for that, but by early 2009, he must have been out on parole because he was out and about again in February.
Is it just me to think that's kind of a hefty sentence?
Yeah.
The drug situations are always hefty to me.
Well, there's been people who have done 25 years for marijuana possession.
It's crazy.
Like, I think drug sentences have actually gone down.
Really?
Since the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm. Well, in addition to all this with the drug dealing, on February 28th of 2009, he was arrested after a string of burglaries. But before the arrest, he'd actually been on the run from police. Always a great idea.
Yeah. So we'll just give a brief rundown of what happened there.
At 4:30 p.m. Friday, February 27th, 2009, Miller County dispatchers received a call from someone who had seen 3 men running from a home in Eugene, Missouri. Deputies responded to the scene, but when they arrived, the 3 suspects fled, leaving behind their car. Police set up a roadblock on Route B, B, and H to search for the 3 men. Soon, one of the suspects was caught, a 21-year-old man named Jesse Patterson. They continued the search for the other 2 men using helicopters, but they weren't able to find them.
Now, these particular criminals had made a really dumb mistake during this burglary, which was basically like handing the case to the police on a silver platter. They'd actually left behind their cell phones, and even more unbelievable, their wallets with their IDs inside were in the car that they left behind.
It's almost like the guy who wrote his signature on the receipt with the person's credit card they stole.
Yeah. Which episode was that again?
That was just a couple weeks ago that I can't remember.
Man, my brain is not working today.
That wasn't it. That was from Forensic Files or one of those shows.
Okay, that's not a case we've covered yet.
No, it's not.
I was going to say, like, usually I can remember these things.
My brain just, like, vomited information.
Yeah, what's with us today? Both of our brains are not at full capacity today. I think it's maybe the dull weather.
It's been a very dull weather day.
Yeah.
It even rained today.
It did. Anyway, it's kind of a good setting for a true crime podcast. So they found their IDs inside the car.
Mm-hmm.
So could you make the police investigators' job any easier?
Don't think so. Well, they were suspected to be the same men who had burglarized a pizza place in December of 2008, where the intruders caused $1,500 worth of damage, busting out windows, kicking holes in walls, and trashing the place.
I'm like, why would someone go to the trouble to cause all that extra damage while just trying to burglarize? You'd think they just want to steal stuff, but maybe it was part of breaking in.
I don't know.
Finding stuff. I don't know.
Some kids.
Some people's kids.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Police actually offered a $500 reward to anyone who could help them find these 2 men. At around 3 p.m. that Sunday, the 2 other men were found inside an apartment in Russellville after a 2-day manhunt of the area using heat-seeking cameras. These guys were, like, serious about finding them.
Yeah, it only took 2 days. And that's another thing I learned, is that police use heat-seeking cameras to look inside buildings and see people's outlines inside, which is just really creepy to me. To think they could just look through our house and see the outlines of us and, like, what we're doing.
I don't know.
Like, what if we were, you know.
So just your outline. I don't know. I don't see anything wrong with it, actually. In fact, they probably wouldn't even find me because I'm always cold.
That's funny. Okay. You probably guessed, but the identity of these men, who was that, Rosie?
Dale Olten Sr. and Dale Olten Jr., and they were charged with second-degree burglary and eventually convicted.
Now, that was Elizabeth Olten's father and stepbrother.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Dale Jr. was sentenced to 7 years, and Dale Sr. was sentenced to 19 years in prison for these burglaries.
And I kind of feel bad for Dale Jr. here because he was only 19 at the time of these burglaries, and his dad was setting a horrible example for him.
Yeah.
I guess he was old enough to know better, but still, when your dad's doing something, it's easy to justify it.
Yeah, I know, but he was like 19, and you know by then, probably shouldn't steal stuff.
Yeah, true. But this is just a bit of history about Elizabeth's family here. The real story of this episode starts about 8 months after this arrest, we just talked about, on October 21st, 2009, when Elizabeth was 9 years old.
Elizabeth lived with her mother in the town of St. Martins, Missouri, which is a suburb of Jefferson City. She had 2 older siblings named Stephanie and Anthony who lived there as well. On Wednesday, October 21st, Elizabeth was at home with the rest of her family. Patty was getting ready to make dinner, and Anthony was playing video games with 2 of his neighbor friends, Nathaniel and Joseph.
Bustamante.
Oh, thank you. Those 2 were twin brothers who lived 4 houses down from them. Elizabeth was rehearsing for an upcoming school play around 5 p.m. when someone knocked on their door. Patty answered it to find the younger sister of the twin boys, 6-year-old Emma Bustamante.
Yeah, actually, I think it might be Bustamante.
Bustamante. Emma asked if Elizabeth could come out to play.
And since it was about time for dinner, Patty really didn't want to let Elizabeth go. But the girls did what kids do, and, they begged. And so she eventually gave in and just told Elizabeth to be back in an hour for dinner.
The power of begging. So
never worked for me, though, when I wanted those Hot Wheels.
I just wore them down, my parents.
You're good at that.
Shut up. So, Elizabeth went to go play with Emma. But 6 p.m. came and went, and Elizabeth didn't show up for dinner. Patty instantly got a bad feeling in her gut because it wasn't like her daughter not to listen to her. And on top of that, her daughter was terrified of the dark.
And this was October in Missouri, and I actually looked it up. Sunset was at 6:22 p.m. on this particular Wednesday, October 21st, 2009, in Jefferson City, Missouri. So it was coming up on this time, and Elizabeth wasn't home, but Patty figured maybe Elizabeth was inside Emma's house and just lost track of time.
So she picked up the phone and called the Bustamante home. Emma's grandma, Karen Brooke, answered the phone, and Patty asked her if Elizabeth was still there.
But the answer she got was not what she hoped for.
Karen said that Elizabeth wasn't there, and she actually hadn't been there at all that day.
That's weird. Can you imagine the panic you'd feel after hearing that?
I think about the panic of, looking around and not seeing my kids at the park.
Right, and after just a few seconds.
That's just, the worst 10 seconds.
Well,
but to be a mom and, to not know where your daughter is when you think you know exactly where she is, that. Ugh. Right away, Patty called the police to report her daughter missing. The Cole County Sheriff's Department showed up within 15 minutes of the call. First, they checked the Bustamante home for Elizabeth.
And this is when things got even more strange, because when they arrived at the house, Emma was there, but there was no sign of Elizabeth.
Oh. They asked Emma about Elizabeth, and she told them she'd been playing with Elizabeth for about an hour, and then she saw Elizabeth walk home. The police began searching for the missing girl, calling as much backup as they could, including the fire department and volunteers from the area. By 10 p.m., hundreds of people were searching the neighborhood and surrounding areas.
But sadly, by this point, it had already been 4 hours since Patty realized her daughter was missing.
But can you believe the support they got in just those 4 hours of hundreds of people?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But Elizabeth actually had a cell phone with her, and Patty was trying to call her nonstop this whole time, but she wasn't answering. Despite this, the police were telling her there was no reason to panic because there was no indication of foul play. I think the fact that she was still missing 4 hours after her friend was home safe and not answering her cell phone is kind of a red flag. But I guess they're probably thinking that she could have just gotten lost after wandering off and maybe dropped her phone. I don't know. Or they could have just been trying to keep her calm while they did their job.
Well, whatever they were trying to do, Patty was not comforted by the attitude of the police. She felt a sense of dread that something horrible had happened to her daughter.
And after all, why would she not answer her phone? That's the big something is wrong here. And, I mean, we're not trying to come down hard on the investigation here. They did a great job
15
putting the
minutes
search together.
it took them just to show up. That's amazing.
But Patty knew something more serious was going on here.
Still, the phone gave the police another way of being able to find her. If they could track the location of her phone, they could at least find that and it would hopefully give them more clues about where Elizabeth had ended up.
Now, police were able to get in contact with the phone company that the cell phone was registered to and order an emergency ping, which identified the cell towers her phone was closest to. And they were able to find the 3 cell towers she was closest to and triangulate the location of the phone, which, you see that on Law & Order back before they had GPS tracking. Mm-hmm. They would triangulate it this way. And that told them that it was in the woods behind the Bustamante house. This was a huge area. It was densely wooded, and it would take many days to search thoroughly, even with all the help they had.
Mm-hmm. They began calling in help from surrounding police departments, as well as search helicopters, dive teams, search dogs, and hundreds of volunteers. They sent out the missing person report to all neighboring departments, making sure everyone was keeping an eye out for Elizabeth.
And then police decided they should take a look at the sex offender registry.
Smart.
And investigate any known sex offenders living nearby because, this was starting to look like a possible kidnapping. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't seem like they found anything useful.
The next day, they still hadn't found anything, and they decided to speak to Emma again.
Well, this time, she added a little bit more to her initial story.
Emma told them that Elizabeth had gotten stuck in some thorn bushes while they were playing, and had started crying and screaming for help from Emma's older sister Alyssa, who had been watching them play.
Now, Alyssa Bustamante was 15 years old, so she was quite a bit older than the other 2 girls, and police decided they should talk to her for more information, because, she was older, she was there when Elizabeth was. Hopefully she'd be able to give them some more useful information than a 6-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Well, Alyssa told them that she'd heard Elizabeth had gone missing, but she had no idea where she was. Police noticed that she was very relaxed and forthcoming with them.
So they didn't see any signs that she was trying to hide anything, and they took her at her word.
But soon after this, as the search continued, some of the volunteers stumbled upon something suspicious in the woods. It was a rectangular patch of dirt that appeared to be recently disturbed and looser than the dirt around it.
They literally described it as looking like a shallow grave. Mm-hmm. And this discovery was disturbing to them, but they didn't touch it. They reported it right away.
Investigators made their way over to the spot where the patch of dirt was found and began looking around the area for any clues, being very careful not to disturb it too much so that they wouldn't tamper with any evidence the forensic team could possibly find here.
The spot was found in the woods behind the Bustamante house, and Alyssa was one of the last people to have seen Elizabeth, so they brought Alyssa out to the spot to see if she could possibly remember anything else about when she was with Elizabeth here after she'd gotten caught in the thorn bushes.
Well, when Alyssa saw the patch of dirt, she actually told the detectives that she had dug that hole.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Maybe she's trying to tell them that they have nothing to worry about. It was just a random hole. But that's obviously not how detectives were going to take it when there's a missing 9-year-old girl who had been with Alyssa just before she disappeared.
They asked her why she dug it, and she said, "I just like digging holes." And that when she came across dead animals in the woods, she would bury them. This is so weird.
I know. In her head, maybe this sounded nice, like she gave animals proper burials and memorials, but in reality, it's a dumb kid thinking that she can outsmart the police. She believes that they trust her now, and she thinks that telling them these things will get them to not worry about whatever's in this hole. But this only made them more suspicious of her, obviously.
Right. So the shallow grave was dug up, and to their surprise, there was nothing inside. So maybe she just likes to dig holes as a hobby.
Yeah.
Because what 15-year-old doesn't like to dig holes?
So it's a relief that Elizabeth's not in there, but it's also another dead end, and they're running out of time.
It had been 2 days since the disappearance, and the police had no leads. But they did get a strange feeling from 15-year-old Alyssa. So having nowhere else to turn, they got a search warrant for the Bustamante home and searched Alyssa's bedroom.
And this is when they became really suspicious of Alyssa.
As soon as the evidence agent entered Alyssa's room, she was disturbed by what she saw. Alyssa's walls were covered in writings and drawings. One spot said, "It was written in blood."
And from what I heard, this was actually written in blood.
Ew.
Which, what the heck is going on here? They also found a poem Alyssa had written about self-harm. So we want to warn you, this is really disturbing and really sad. And from here on, this episode is going to be really tough to listen to. But Rosie, will you read that poem?
Yeah, but first, where's her mom? Why isn't her mom?
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Okay. The poem said, "I cut to focus when my brain is racing. I cut to make physical what I feel inside. I cut to see blood because I like it. I don't like to cut, but I can't give it up."
Clearly, this is a very disturbed 15-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And like I said, we'll get more into her past later. But what else did they find?
Another drawing on her wall was the outline of a person in red, with 3 lines drawn across the face, appearing to be like a slash mark. And next to this, in the drawing, she'd written Emma, her sister's name. Police also looked into Alyssa's online presence and found a YouTube video Alyssa had made of her 2 twin brothers, where she was trying to coax them into touching an electric fence while she filmed. On the screen in the video, Alyssa wrote the words, "This is where it gets good. We get to see my brothers get hurt."
So she has some really disturbing ideas and thoughts toward her siblings and even tries to act on them. But what's the thing that really got the attention of the investigator?
Well, that would be a journal where Alyssa had written a lot of disturbing things. One entry talked about burning down a house to kill all the people inside. Another entry, dated just a week before the disappearance, said, "If I don't talk about it, I bottle it up. And when I explode, someone's gonna die."
So just a week before Elizabeth disappeared, one of the girls who was with her when she disappeared wrote this in her journal, that someone's gonna die. But Alyssa had actually made an entry the same day Elizabeth went missing as well, and this one was really suspicious.
The entry from that day was completely scribbled out.
Red flag.
Except for the date and the last sentence, which said, "I gotta go to church now, LOL."
So, of course, the police took this journal as evidence, and the next morning they brought Alyssa into the station again with her grandmother.
Sergeant David Rice interviewed her, and just before going in to talk to her, he looked at the journal entry. He used backlighting by holding the paper over a light and was able to make out 2 words that made him even more disturbed than before. The words slit and throat are what he found. When he spoke to Alyssa, she wasn't as calm and composed as she was the first time. The longer they spoke, the more she began to quiver and look away from him. She kept growing more and more uncomfortable, and just when Sergeant Rice felt she was going to break, he brought out the journal and told her, "We have your diary, and we've read it, even the last entry, which was scribbled out."
So, even though at this point they hadn't been able to read the whole thing yet, he'd seen enough to know that Alyssa had something to do with Elizabeth's disappearance. And he was using pressure and intimidation to get it out of her, and it worked.
Alyssa finally admitted that she did know what happened. She told the detective that on the night Elizabeth disappeared, she was walking with her when Elizabeth suddenly tripped and fell, hit her head, and died.
So, Alyssa's trying to tell them this was all an accident, but after reading the journal and everything else on top of it, they weren't buying this story.
Well, yeah, and Emma was there. She told them what she saw, that she just got caught in a thorn bush and was yelling for help.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's very inconsistent.
It's interesting you bring that up because, well, you'll see in a minute.
After this, they told her that when they find Elizabeth's body, they'll be able to find out exactly what caused her death during the autopsy. So there's really no use lying to them. After this, they asked her flat out, "Was Elizabeth's throat cut?"
Because those were the words that they could make out from the journal.
This got Alyssa to finally crack, and she said yes.
Now, remember, Alyssa's grandmother was in the room at the time. And at this point, she became overwhelmed with emotion and left the room in tears because,
How could
she's
you not?
a normal person.
Right.
And she just saw her granddaughter admit to slitting another girl's throat.
Next, Alyssa told them what really happened on the evening of the 21st. Alyssa said she told her 6-year-old half-sister Emma to go knock on Elizabeth's door and get her to come play outside. Once Emma got Elizabeth outside, Alyssa told Emma to go home.
So Emma wasn't even there.
Then she took Elizabeth by the hand and walked her into the woods, saying that she wanted to show her something just a little bit further in. They walked for about 15 minutes and made it a 1/4 mile into the woods. Alyssa led the 9-year-old girl to a hole she had dug before.
So obviously this was so premeditated that she'd already dug a grave, but it wasn't the one that was found during the search. So this next part is really disturbing. So just a fair warning to everyone listening that if you don't want to hear how Elizabeth lost her life, then we'll want to skip ahead.
When they got there, Alyssa turned toward Elizabeth and looked her in the eyes as she began to strangle her. After strangling her multiple times, she pulled out a knife she'd taken from the kitchen of her home and used it to finish off the young girl.
This is so sad. Elizabeth watched this older girl who she trusted take her life away. And this is another really disturbing detail, but I think it's important because Elizabeth was most likely conscious for it and had to live, experience it.
Right.
But Alyssa stabbed her in the chest 7 times before finishing her off the way she described it in her journal. So this poor little girl had to suffer for however long this took. It's absolutely disgusting.
After this, Alyssa buried the girl's lifeless body in the pre-dug grave. Now that the detectives had learned what really happened, they asked Alyssa to show them where this grave was, and she did. The grave was only a couple inches deep, and detectives were able to see her shape before they even dug her out.
Which is insane that they had so many people searching the area and never found this. But it just goes to show how massive these areas are and how difficult it is to really search them. I really respect all the work these volunteers put in.
Well, it shows how premeditated it was, too, because I'm sure she was trying to find the perfect spot.
Oh, yeah.
The autopsy confirmed Alyssa's most recent story, and detectives were able to use a blue light to read the entirety of her journal entry about that day. It read, "I just effing killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them, and now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kind of nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now, lol."
Ugh.
Wow. That was hard to read.
I could tell, it is. For any normal person to think about what she just did, and then she wrote this.
She says it was amazing, and it's pretty enjoyable. This girl needs a lot of help.
I know.
There's something seriously wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It's very clear that she is not in the right state of mind. And I want to talk more about that later, but just from what we read, she has absolutely no regard or respect for the life that she's just taken from this 9-year-old girl. No care about the family who's lost their daughter and sister. She just says, LOL. It's mind-boggling. How could a 15-year-old girl possibly even be capable of this? I have no idea, but there was more from her past we haven't shared yet, and I think it's very important.
Really quick, though, in this journal entry, you can see how selfish and self-centered she is because all of her sentences start with I. She doesn't once mention the person who she killed. Or how did she say it? Yeah, she just said someone. She doesn't identify that it was the young girl. She doesn't say anything about how she knew her. It's so self-centered.
Yeah, she was basically just a tool for Alyssa to act out her own fantasies.
All right, let's talk about Alyssa's past. In 2002, when she was 7 years old, Alyssa and her younger twin brothers moved in with their grandma, Karen Brooke, who became their legal guardian when her parents couldn't care for her. Alyssa's mother, Michelle, struggled with drug addiction, which made it impossible for her to afford caring for her daughter. She'd been convicted of 3 misdemeanors, including drunk driving and marijuana possession.
So, obviously, with these kind of habits, her mother struggled to pay rent and to give her daughter a stable home. But her father was even worse.
Cesar Bustamante, her father, was a very violent man and had been charged with 3 counts of felony assault after stabbing someone multiple times, and he was sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms in prison.
So needless to say, her parents were really messed up. She had to have had a really rough 7 years growing up with them before she moved in with her grandma while all this was going on. But Alyssa actually kept in contact with her violent father via letters and phone calls while he was in prison, and she'd actually tape the letters from him to her bedroom walls. So she still had his influence in her life, despite him being a violent criminal.
Well, yeah, she wants at least one parent in her life. Even with all this, Alyssa did well in school, getting A's and B's. Her grandmother seemed to have given her a very stable and loving home.
Although somehow Alyssa had all this weird stuff written on her walls, and they didn't notice. So that's really odd. But I guess a lot of people are into dark stuff or do odd things and don't go on to harm other people, so maybe she just tried to look past it.
I get that. When I was a teenager, I had super dark and emo junk all over my walls.
Yeah, but compared
not like
to this?
No, I'm just saying, like, I think everyone goes through their little goth stage.
And the YouTube video with the brothers?
No, I did not.
You would never try to hurt your brothers.
No, I just tried to embarrass them.
Yeah. But Alyssa's issues went deeper than just trying to be an edgy teenager like you were.
Alyssa had actually attempted suicide multiple times and would regularly practice self-harm. After one of these attempts, she actually spent 10 days in a psychiatric hospital.
So you'd hope that she would get the help she needs and some good therapy when she ends up in a psych hospital for 10 days after trying to take her life, you know? That's literally a piece of work for therapists. That she needs help. But it seems that all she really got from this was a prescription for antidepressants, which is fine, but drugs treat symptoms. Therapy treats the real issue. And I would hope that when someone is 15 years old, they would try therapy before adding drugs to the mix. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, therapy helps the mind. The drugs help the mind too, but it's a very different...
Well, yeah, it's a supplemental thing to actually healing the real problems, you know?
Alyssa also had a MySpace page, and under the hobbies section, she had listed killing people and cutting. Alyssa had a best friend named Jennifer who said that Alyssa had shown her where she'd cut herself on multiple occasions. She also said that at Alyssa's 15th birthday party on January 28th, 2009, she had said, "I just wonder what it would be like to just kill someone, to see the life just drain out of someone. I wonder what it would feel like, that type of power, to take that away from someone."
So this is basically what she did to Elizabeth. She wanted to look her in the eyes while she did this. But this is such a huge red flag and such a horrible thing for a 15-year-old to say. But I can't believe she felt okay with saying this to her friends. Like, she didn't even worry that they'd freak out on her. That's really disturbing to me because she was in such a messed up place mentally, it feels like.
Well, maybe that's why she didn't worry, because she wasn't thinking clearly.
Exactly. Something that did get to me, though, while researching this case is that when I Googled Elizabeth Olten mother, it came up Michelle Bustamante, the mother of Elizabeth's murderer, who definitely didn't do much to help her daughter to become a good person. But can you imagine how Elizabeth's real mother, Patty, would feel if she did that search? And type in her daughter's name and mother, and the mother of her killer comes up.
Right.
And, that makes me realize there's still a huge problem of glorifying criminals above the victims. I mean, these people commit a horrible act against another innocent person, in this case, taking the life of a 9-year-old girl. But in most places where this case is covered, it centers around Alyssa Bustamante, not Elizabeth. I'd just really feel bad for Patty if she did Google that. But Patty did try to get what little justice she could out of this situation, because obviously this would be an unimaginable thing to live through.
Right. Patty filed a $5 million civil lawsuit against Alyssa to make sure she could never profit off of her crime.
And from what I understood, if Alyssa ever gets out of prison and starts earning money, anything she makes beyond $25,000 a year will go to Patty until $5 million plus 9% interest per year is paid off.
When they talk about profit off of her crime, does that mean like books and stuff? Like that kind of situation?
Well, any kind of, interviews or anything where someone would be paying to talk to Alyssa or anything from Alyssa would go to Patty.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the sentencing. Alyssa appeared in court on November 17th, 2009 and pled not guilty despite having a confession to police. How do you think this will work?
Yeah, I've always been confused when that happens.
She was indicted on first-degree murder and armed criminal action. Her defense claimed that she should be granted leniency due to her troubled childhood. But
that didn't actually work, and she was going to be tried as an adult with the death penalty on the table.
Oh, that's heavy.
Yeah.
In 2012, Alyssa accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty.
Apparently in Missouri, given the circumstances of this murder and being charged with first degree, it would have pretty much been an automatic death sentence since she was being tried as an adult, even though she was only 15 at the time of the crime. And in 2005, the Supreme Court passed a ruling that it is unconstitutional to impose capital punishment for crimes committed by a minor. So if she would have been tried as an adult and found guilty, the ruling would have gone against the Supreme Court's ruling, which is a mind bender, but it would have happened.
Yeah, I don't think it's right for a minor to have the death penalty.
We'll talk about that at the end.
Okay.
But how did this plea deal work?
Well, the plea deal changed the first-degree charge to a second-degree charge, but it came with a life sentence with a chance of parole after 35 years. In March 2014, she did appeal the sentence, but it was denied.
So now, Rosie, what do you think?
Well, it's just so hard to say because she was like 15, but I mean, I can't say I disagree with life sentence is so huge, but she has a chance of parole, but it was denied. I don't know, it's kind of a...
Well, the appeal was denied.
The
parole can't be applied for until 35 years in.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take this super seriously, but at the same time, it's like, how did nobody realize... I mean, her friends realized that this was going on. How did her parents or her mom or her grandma not realize?
Yeah.
I just feel like if somebody would have stepped in, she could have probably gotten the help that she needed, and this would have been avoided. Yeah,
you would hope. I feel you. Like, I would describe this as a war inside myself about how I feel on this case, because what Elizabeth did to this 9-year-old girl is absolutely disgusting. And I can't imagine the pain that Patty has gone through knowing what happened. And there's no denying that this was extremely premeditated and planned out. But on the other hand, she was 15. Her father was in prison since she was a little girl. Her mom was super irresponsible and let her addiction take priority over her children. She was suicidal. She was in a psych hospital for 10 days. And about the mother, too, I do wonder, since Caesar was such a violent man, if he was abusive to Michelle while they were together.
Yeah.
And what Alyssa saw while they were together. That would explain why Michelle was using drugs and having such a rough time. But I'd say Caesar would be way more to blame for the fate of his daughter than Michelle was, because he actually harmed another person intentionally. He was violent. Drug charges are much more complicated. She was probably self-medicating to deal with some kind of trauma, possibly caused by Caesar.
Yeah.
But that's just speculation. And I'm just going to say I have no idea what the right decision is in this case. I wouldn't claim to know, and I wouldn't want to be the one making the decision.
No, I wouldn't either.
It's just a horribly sad and messed up case all around. But I do find it a bit odd that there was pretty much no consideration for leniency because of the horrible influence of her father and the past of mental illness. I hope that now, while she's serving her sentence, she's getting treatment, therapy, so she can, not only so she can recover, but so she can realize the gravity of what she did to this 9-year-old girl.
Right.
Because if you're not in the right state of mind, you can't properly process what you did.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because if we were talking about an adult who did this, I'd be like, yeah, fry him. That's
right?
Probably not the nicest thing to say. I would show no mercy to an adult, is what I'm trying to say. But to a kid who seemed to have a troubled background, though it sounds like her grandma did try her best to have a comforting family home.
And I think that's one of the things that got this leniency pretty much shoved out the window, is that she did seem to be in a more stable home now. But look at the crap she was allowed to have written on her walls in that home.
Come on, Karen.
And
get on it.
Yeah, clearly she wasn't paying much attention to what Alyssa was doing in there. And again, Alyssa was still writing back and forth with her violent father, not to mention the mental illness that was not properly treated. She was obviously not right in the head if she could commit this disgusting act and feel no remorse about it at 15 years old.
Right.
So it makes me wonder if she fully understood her actions.
Well, didn't they do a psych evaluation on her? Or they just threw her in a trial?
You would think so. But then again, with that said, she did cover it up. She knew it was wrong, and there's no denying that she's a danger to society, at least in the state she was in when she was convicted. So those are just a few of my conflicting thoughts over this case. I am curious what you listeners think. Feel free to let us know on Facebook or Instagram if you have any thoughts on this case. Rosie, do you have anything else to say?
I don't know, if your kid starts digging holes for no reason.
Grave-shaped holes.
And it's just this is my new hobby. Check in on them. Read the diary.
Well, I think a lot of the stuff that goes on in the woods when kids are playing, parents have no idea because kids are just off playing,
Yeah, what a doozy.
Again, I don't want to forget the real victim here, Elizabeth Olten and her mother, Patty Prius. The pain is unimaginable, and I think Patty is completely in the right not showing mercy to Alyssa. This person caused the death of her 9-year-old daughter. Can you even imagine letting your kid out to play with a neighborhood friend and never seeing her again? You don't suspect kids of being capable of this?
No, and I bet she just beats herself up about it because she didn't want to let Elizabeth go out to play so close to dinner. I can't
even imagine that.
Yeah.
I hope she doesn't, because there's nothing she could have done. It's a good thing for a mom to let their kids play with friends, but she could have never known what was going to happen. It's just tragic and heartbreaking, this whole thing. But that's where we're going to wrap it up, unless you have anything else to say.
I don't. Just stay warm. The seasons are changing.
Yeah, we turned the heat on today for the first time.
Again, we want to say a huge thank you to our patrons. We really appreciate every one of you. And if you aren't a patron, think about signing up. We have some cool stuff on there. And we're also opening the vault and putting out our forbidden episodes that we never thought we would share ever again. Meaning our first 20-ish.
Yeah, that was actually thanks to the new patron, Samantha, who we said at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, Samantha asked us about where she could find them. And in my head, I'm like, oh, girl, you don't want those. But we are going to give them to patrons because they must like us enough not to care about the terrible quality. So.
Yeah, it's weird, huh?
Yeah.
But thank you guys. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, and we are going to do our spin the wheel giveaway for our shirt.
Oh, yeah, the drawing.
Yeah, our drawing. So, if you're not a patron...
Yeah, basically, if you're a patron, you're automatically entered every month.
Yeah, any level, doesn't matter.
To win a t-shirt for free. So, yeah, I mean...
Wrap yourselves up in a short-sleeve t-shirt.
I think that's all we got to say.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, if this is your first time listening, you can follow us on Instagram at VOV Podcast. You can also find us on Twitter at VOVPod, email us at vovpodcast@gmail.com, and Facebook at Voice of the Victim Support System. Those are all good ways to contact us. Actually, Twitter's not great because I have notifications turned off on Twitter. Because there's just so much crazy crap going on over there. But feel free to reach out to us through some of those channels. If you do choose Twitter, it might be a while before you hear back from us. But I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.